I call Kim Leadbeater to move that the bill now be read a third time.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour and a privilege to open the debates for the third reading of the Terminally Ill Adults End-of-Life Bill. It has been a long journey to get here, and I do not underestimate the significance of this day. It is not often we are asked to wrestle with issues of morality, ethics and humanity. But with great privilege of this job comes great responsibility, and never more so than at a time like this. Benjamin Franklin told us that in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. In this House, we debate the latter incessantly. But here, and in the country as a whole, discussing death is something we tend to shy away from. And yet, it will come to us all and to all those we love.
Not to die. This is not to live. 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 Not to die.
A growing canon of professionals and their independent professional bodies have urged great caution about this bill, not on the principle, but are opposed to the details of this bill and believe it should be defeated.
What he's saying is people have got different views, and they do have different views. We have different views in this House, and different people in different professions have different views. Every Royal College has a neutral position on assisted dying because of that. I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. And the many safeguards in this bill ensure only terminally ill patients that are eligible under the strict criteria and who want to access assisted dying can do so.
This is one of the most far-reaching considerations that the House, even those of us who've been here for a very long time, can probably remember. And it's understandable that a lot of members will wish to take part on both sides of the House and in both sides of the argument. Looking around, it's quite clear that we cannot accommodate everybody. That means that inevitably it is likely that there will be quite a considerable number of interventions. All I would say gently is that interventions will be taken into account when considering the order of priority in which members are called. Mark Garnier.
And like many people that I've heard making speeches, I come to this through personal experience. And I've heard many stories of people who've had relations who have died. And in my case, it was my mother who died. And in 2012, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My father-in-law was a consultant. I phoned him up and asked him what that meant. And he said she has a 90% chance of dying. And so I was prepared for it. But eventually you come to that point where you get the telephone call, her health has started to deteriorate. You go down to go and see her. You take time off work here. You talk to the whips. And you watch the start of the decline for something as painful and as difficult as pancreatic cancer, which for those who've witnessed it is not a nice moment. My mother wasn't frightened of dying at all. My mother would talk about it and she knew that she was going to die, but she was terrified of the pain. And on many occasions she said to me and Caroline, my wife, can we make it end? And of course we couldn't. But she had very, very good care, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from the NHS. The nurses came twice a day. She was on a morphine driver. The GP came and saw her. She was looked after well, but as it deteriorated, you could see she was in indignity and in a huge amount of pain. And eventually she died, and it was not one of the happiest moments of my life, of course.
Assist us to live, not to die. Assist us to live, not to die. Assist us to live, not to die. Assist us to live, not to die.
Because this bill is about many different things, but actually fundamentally it is about two things. It is about power and it's about trust. It's about the power over life and death, not just over ourselves. Because we already have the power to end our own lives. It's called suicide. It is not a crime. It hasn't been a crime in this country for decades. This is a different power. This is about the power of the state through its agents to exercise power over life and death. Yes, agreed. Yes, approved of in advance. But when the state takes a life, even with consent, that is a huge shift in the relationship between the individual and the state. It is a transformation in the way in which power lies, and we should be fully conscious what it is that is being done. So that's why this debate needs, frankly, a little bit more honesty. Because we've heard the blandishments and the warm words of euphemism, of assisted dying. But the truth is, this isn't assisted dying. Assisted dying is what a hospice does already, today, now. Right. Helping people, caring for people, supporting them. This is assisted killing or assisted suicide, depending on which word you choose.
And there has been much debate about giving people choice, what happens in other jurisdictions, and matters of faith and principle. And I've heard from nearly 1,000 constituents, the vast majority of whom oppose the bill for a range of reasons. Yeah. I too oppose the bill at second reading, and I set out my concerns, including those of principle, but also of major concern about safeguarding. And as an ex-children's services manager with over 18 years frontline experience, far from issues of safeguarding being improved in committee, many of the provisions have actually been weakened. Yeah. And my concerns are clear, actually very similar to the Right Honourable Member from Chingford and Woodford Green. The High Court stage safeguard was removed from the bill, fundamentally altering the basis on which members voted at second reading. And both the panels that replaced the court approval and the Voluntary Assisted Dying Commissioner who would oversee them are new and untested concepts. They would not have the powers or functions of a court or tribunal. They would not be required to question witnesses and could not compel them to attend. And the doctors who are intended to have assessed people's capacity and freedom to choose an assisted death would not give evidence on oath. And there would be nobody to cross-examine them. And the new Assisted Dying Commissioner would run the assisted dying system and at the same time be responsible for monitoring, investigating and reporting on its work, replacing the role previously given to the independent chief medical officers. And the very definition of terminal illness has proved to be seriously flawed, as it would allow people with anorexia to qualify.
Perish from the way. If voices of begin to rest all hands on his day.
That is the individual with a terminal diagnosis who is best placed to decide when it is their time to slip away. As a society, we do not talk about death enough. It's one of those subjects that we shy away from. But there are thousands of our fellow citizens each year who must come to terms with terminal diagnoses, their medical treatment, and ultimately their final days. And I want to put on record my thanks to the Honourable Member for Spen Valley for the way that she's conducted this debate. And I know at times it's been particularly difficult, particularly from the criticism from outside this place. Voting for the status quo, voting against this bill will not solve the problem. Indeed, with the advance of medical techniques that prolong life, but not necessarily the quality of life, the case for a compassionate ending to one's life will continue to grow.
But I would perhaps just gently say that in this place, sometimes good intentions don't always yield the good results that we all may strive for. And as I've monitored the progress of this bill, I have continued to struggle with it, and there is nothing in it that has changed my mind. What I would like to say, though, is that the importance of these debates are monumental, and that's underpinned by the literally thousands of comments and emails I've had from my constituents in Aldridge Brownhill. Some have been writing to me on this matter since before the first debate at the end of November. I also struggle with this bill to see how it's been proceeding through this place, in the sense that there's been much likening to previous pioneering moral and ethical legislation brought to the House, but I would argue it's very different to that which has gone as before in the last few months. Now, some honourable members have been correct to cite that some of the most pioneering social legislation of the post-war period were introduced via a private member's bill, most notably in the 1967 Abortion Act and the 1967 Sexual Offences Act, which was to decriminalise homosexuality. But it would be remiss of me not to point out that both of those bills had gone through an extensive government-led public inquiry to pave the way for legislation, not least of all the Medical Advisory Committee under the chairmanship of Sir John Peel to consider the abortion bill, and the Wolfenden Commission to consider the laws on homosexuality, something which I'm afraid this bill sadly lacks today.
I actually wanted more experts. And at that point as well, the experts outside were split. They have always been split on this. There will never be unanimity across the professions on this itself. The one area, though, where I've taken careful attention is the point that was made by my honourable friend from Lewisham North. And can I just say to her, I'm so proud that she actually resigned over the issue of the benefit cuts. And I know how difficult that was for her. She was my whip. She's the nicest whip I've ever had. But she's right. She's right in that the majority of the disability organisations, the campaigning ones in particular, have been opposed to the legislation. And that's why I've tried to ensure that some of the issues that they've raised has been translated into the bill itself. And the one thing that I just thought was a huge breakthrough for this House in particular was building in the Disability Advisory Group, because that will be the group that has representatives, I hope, from a whole range of the disability groups, including, I hope, disabled people against the cuts, the radical group.
The result will be either people choosing to end their lives before they want to, or those who already have a huge distrust in the system, particularly from minority and disadvantaged communities whose voices have been heard the least in this debate, choosing not to access the care they need, dying an even more traumatic death. I do not believe that supporters of this bill want to see either of those things to happen.
It's often said that Parliament is the conscience of the nation, but I believe that it's also its safeguard. There are people who will benefit from physician-assisted suicide as implemented in this bill, but there are also people who will be harmed. Those with mental illness, those in care homes, those who feel a burden, those who are made to feel a burden, and those who are abused. The bill's safeguards are inadequate. The Royal College of Psychiatrists, the Royal College of Physicians, of which I'm a member, the Royal College of Pathologists, countless doctors, professionals, charities, have all been ignored in pursuit of absolutist principle above understanding. It's a facile interpretation of autonomy to give it no bounds, or to ignore its prerequisites. We must hear these concerns and today act accordingly. Mr. Speaker, for who are we, if not the champions of the vulnerable, the voice of the voiceless? The question before us today is, do we believe this harm to the vulnerable is worth it?
The ayes to the right, 314. The noes to the left, 291. The ayes have it, and look!